After a romantic trip with his mistress, his pregnant wife returned papers that shocked everyone. Denver, Colorado. A cold Sunday afternoon in March. The house felt different that Sunday. Caroline Hayes couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something had shifted in the air of their cozy two-story home in the Highlands neighborhood. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light filtered through their living room windows, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Or maybe it was the hollow feeling that had been growing in her chest for weeks now. At 5 months pregnant, Caroline had learned to trust her instincts more than ever. Her body was changing, yes, but her intuition had become razor sharp. And right now, every fiber of her being was telling her that something was terribly wrong. Nathaniel was in the shower upstairs, humming some tune she didn't recognize. He'd been humming a lot lately, always that same melody. When she'd asked about it last week, he'd shrugged and said it was just stuck in his head from the radio. But Caroline knew every song on every station Nathaniel listened to, and this wasn't one of them. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, face down. It had been buzzing intermittently for the past hour, but he hadn't seemed to notice, or care. That was strange too. Nathaniel Hayes, regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, was practically married to his phone. Work calls, client emergencies, urgent emails. He never ignored his phone. Caroline placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling little Emma's gentle kicks. That's what they were calling the baby. Emma. Nathaniel had suggested it 3 months ago, saying it was his grandmother's name. They'd even started setting up the nursery with soft yellow walls and white furniture, carefully avoiding anything too pink or blue until they could be certain about the baby's gender. The buzzing started again. 3 short bursts, then silence, then 3 more. Caroline glanced toward the staircase, hearing the water still running upstairs. The shower would run for at least another 10 minutes. Nathaniel was nothing if not predictable in his routines. Sunday showers were always exactly 15 minutes. Hot water until the bathroom mirror fogged completely. She looked at the phone again. The buzzing had stopped, but a small notification light blinked blue in the darkness. Someone was definitely trying to reach him. What if it was work? What if there was an emergency with one of his accounts? Caroline had never been the type of wife to snoop. In 7 years of marriage, she'd respected Nathaniel's privacy completely. His phone was his business, his laptop was his domain. She'd even felt a little proud of their mutual respect, the way they trusted each other without question. But something had been eating at her for weeks now. Little things that didn't quite add up. Business trips that seemed to have fewer work calls than usual. Late nights at the office that never resulted in overtime pay. A new cologne she didn't recognize. And that humming, always that same mysterious melody. The phone buzzed again, and this time it didn't stop. Someone was calling. Caroline's heart started racing, though she couldn't explain why. She could hear Nathaniel's voice from upstairs, still humming that tune, completely oblivious to the world outside the bathroom. The phone continued its insistent buzzing, and she found herself taking a step closer to the counter. Just as she reached for it, the buzzing stopped. The silence felt deafening. She stood there for a moment, hand hovering over the device, feeling like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. Every rational part of her mind was screaming to walk away, to go back to folding baby clothes or reading her pregnancy book. But her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. The phone lit up with a text notification. Even face down, she could see the screen glow. Caroline had been married to Nathaniel Hayes since she was 24 years old. She'd loved him through his career changes, through her father's death, through the 3 years they'd struggled to conceive. She'd supported his dreams, celebrated his successes, and held him through his failures. But as she stood in her own kitchen on that cold March afternoon, 5 months pregnant with their first child, Caroline realized she was about to discover whether the man she'd loved for 7 years was the man she thought she knew. She picked up the phone. The lock screen showed 3 missed calls and 2 text messages, all from someone named V with a heart emoji. The preview of the latest text was partially visible. Had the most amazing time this weekend, can't wait to. Caroline's breath caught in her throat. She knew Nathaniel's contacts. She'd helped him organize them when he'd gotten this phone 6 months ago. There was no V in his phone, and there had definitely never been a heart emoji. Her hands were shaking now, but she couldn't stop herself. She swiped up and entered his passcode, their wedding anniversary, like it had always been. The phone unlocked immediately, and what she saw made her legs nearly give out. The conversation thread with V went back weeks. Photos, messages, plans. And there, at the top of the thread, was a picture that made her blood run cold. Nathaniel, her husband, kissing a woman she'd never seen before. A beautiful woman with long dark hair and a smile that looked like it belonged in a magazine. They were standing in front of what looked like a mountain resort. Snow-capped peaks in the background. Caroline's mind raced. Last weekend, Nathaniel had said he was going to a medical conference in Aspen. Work networking, boring presentations, early nights. He'd been apologetic about it, promising to make it up to her when he got back. But this photo told a different story. This photo showed her husband of 7 years, the father of her unborn child, looking happier than she'd seen him in months, with another woman. Carolyn scrolled up through the conversation, each message feeling like a knife to her chest. Hotel reservations, dinner plans, inside jokes she didn't understand, and photos. So many photos. The woman, V, was stunning. But more than that, she looked sophisticated, confident, worldly. Everything Caroline used to think she was before pregnancy made her feel clumsy and tired and ordinary. Thank you for the most perfect weekend, baby. I already miss the way you hold me. Can't believe we have to wait 2 whole weeks to see each other again. I love how you make me feel like the only woman in the world. Caroline's vision blurred as tears started flowing. She could hear the shower still running upstairs. Could hear Nathaniel still humming that damn tune. The same tune this woman had probably been humming. The same tune that had been driving Caroline crazy for weeks. She scrolled down to the most recent messages, sent just an hour ago while Nathaniel had been sitting next to her on the couch, asking if she wanted more tea. Already planning our next escape, maybe somewhere tropical this time? I want to see you in that blue shirt again, among other things. You're making this whole situation so much more exciting than I thought it would be. I never thought I could feel this way about a married man, but you make it seem so right. Caroline dropped the phone like it was on fire. It clattered against the granite counter, the sound echoing through the quiet kitchen. Her whole body was shaking now, and she had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from falling. 7 years. 7 years of marriage, and this was what it had come to. A stranger named V, with a heart emoji, planning tropical getaways with her husband, while Caroline sat at home, growing their child. The shower finally stopped running upstairs. In a few minutes, Nathaniel would come down, probably ask what was for dinner, maybe comment on how the baby was moving more lately. He'd kiss her forehead and ask about her day, and she'd have to look at him knowing what she now knew. Caroline wiped her tears and placed both hands on her belly. Little Emma was kicking now, as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's okay, baby," Caroline whispered. "Mommy's going to figure this out." But as she heard Nathaniel's footsteps starting down the stairs, Caroline Hayes realized that nothing would ever be okay again. Not in the way it had been. Not in the way she'd believed it was. The man she'd loved for 7 years was humming another woman's song, and Caroline was about to find out just how strong she really was. The same Sunday evening, Hayes' family home, Denver Nathaniel came down the stairs with his usual post-shower energy, hair still damp, wearing the navy blue polo shirt that Caroline had bought him for Christmas. The same blue shirt that the woman in the photos had mentioned wanting to see again. Caroline stood frozen at the kitchen counter, his phone still face up where she'd dropped it. The screen had gone dark, but she could still see those messages burned into her retinas. Every word, every heart emoji, every casual mention of their perfect weekend. "Hey, babe," Nathaniel said, walking over to kiss her forehead. It was their routine. He always kissed her forehead when he came downstairs, then placed his hand on her belly to say hello to the baby. "How are my girls doing?" The casual affection that had once made her feel cherished now felt like acid on her skin. Caroline managed not to flinch, but she couldn't bring herself to smile. "We're fine," she said, her voice sounding strange and distant even to herself. Nathaniel didn't seem to notice. He placed his hand on her 5-month bump, and Caroline felt their baby kick in response. Little Emma always responded to her father's voice, his touch. Caroline wondered if the baby could sense the tension radiating from her mother's body. "She's getting strong," Nathaniel said with genuine warmth. "I swear she kicks harder every day." Caroline watched his face as he spoke to their unborn daughter. He looked normal, happy even. There was no guilt in his eyes, no shadow of deception. Just the same man who had been excited about becoming a father, who had spent hours researching cribs and car seats, who had insisted on taking birthing classes, even though he was terrified of fainting during delivery. How was it possible that this man, this seemingly devoted husband and father-to-be, had spent the weekend in Aspen with another woman? "Nate," Caroline said quietly, testing the waters. How was your conference? He moved to the refrigerator, grabbing a bottle of water. Oh, you know how those things are. Boring presentations, terrible coffee. I'm just glad to be home. The lie came so easily, so naturally. Caroline felt something cold settle in her stomach as she watched him take a long drink of water, completely comfortable with his deception. Did you learn anything useful? She pressed. Nathaniel shrugged. The usual stuff. New product launches, market trends. Nothing too exciting. He glanced at the counter and noticed his phone. Oh, thanks. I was wondering where I'd left this. Caroline held her breath as he picked up the device. Would he check his messages? Would he see that someone had been looking through his phone? But Nathaniel just slipped the phone into his pocket without even glancing at the screen. What do you want to do for dinner? He asked. I could cook that pasta you like with the sun-dried tomatoes. It was surreal. Here was her husband, offering to make her favorite meal, acting like the perfect partner, while his phone held evidence of a relationship that could destroy their entire life together. Caroline felt like she was living in some kind of twisted parallel universe. I'm not really hungry, she said. Come on, Car, Nathaniel said, using the nickname that had always made her smile. You need to eat. The baby needs you to eat. The way he said it, with such caring concern, made Caroline want to scream, or cry, or both. I think I'm going to take a bath, she said instead. Maybe go to bed early. Nathaniel looked at her with mild concern. Are you feeling okay? You seem a little off. A little off. Caroline almost laughed. Her husband had just spent a romantic weekend with another woman, and he was worried that she seemed a little off. Just tired, she managed. Okay, well, I'll make some pasta anyway, in case you change your mind. Caroline nodded and headed toward the stairs, leaving Nathaniel in the kitchen. As she climbed each step, she could hear him moving around below, opening cabinets, running water. The sounds of their normal Sunday evening routine, but nothing was normal anymore. In their bathroom, Caroline ran hot water into the clawfoot tub they'd restored together 3 years ago. It had been one of their first major home improvement projects, and they'd been so proud of the result. She'd imagined taking baths in this tub throughout her pregnancy, maybe even giving their baby her first baths here someday. Now the tub felt like a sanctuary, the only place where she could think clearly. Caroline lowered herself into the hot water, grateful that her belly was still small enough to make this comfortable. She closed her eyes and tried to process what she'd discovered, but her mind kept spinning in circles. Who was this woman? How long had it been going on? Was Aspen their first trip together, or had there been others? How many work conferences had actually been romantic getaways? And what was she supposed to do now? Caroline had always prided herself on being strong, independent, practical. She'd put herself through college, built a solid career in marketing, bought this house with Nathaniel as equal partners. She wasn't the type of woman who fell apart when life got complicated, but she'd also never imagined facing anything like this. She could confront him tonight, march downstairs, throw his phone in his face, demand answers. But what would that accomplish? He'd probably deny it at first, then maybe confess and beg forgiveness. There would be tears, promises, possibly couples therapy. And then what? Would she ever trust him again? Would she spend the rest of her pregnancy wondering where he really was during every business trip? Would she raise their daughter in a house built on lies and broken promises? Caroline sank deeper into the hot water, letting it cover her shoulders. Through the bathroom door, she could hear Nathaniel moving around their bedroom, probably changing into his pajamas. Soon he'd brush his teeth, check his phone one more time, and climb into bed beside her. He'd probably try to cuddle, maybe talk about baby names or nursery decorations. The thought made her feel sick. Her phone, sitting on the edge of the tub, buzzed with a text message. Caroline glanced at it and saw a message from her best friend Jessica. How's the pregnancy treating you? Coffee this week? Jessica. Caroline hadn't told anyone about the strange feelings she'd been having lately, the sense that something was wrong with her marriage. She'd kept it to herself, assuming it was just pregnancy hormones making her paranoid. But now she had proof that her instincts had been right all along. Caroline stared at Jessica's message for a long moment. She could text back right now, tell her what had happened, ask for advice. Jessica had been through her own divorce 3 years ago. She'd understand the shock, the disbelief, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, but something held Caroline back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the hope that this was all just a terrible nightmare she'd wake up from. Maybe it was the fear that saying it out loud would make it real. Instead, she typed back, "Doing well. Coffee sounds great. I'll call you tomorrow." As Caroline set her phone aside and closed her eyes again, she heard Nathaniel's footsteps in the bedroom. In a few minutes, he'd probably call out to ask if she was okay, if she needed anything. He'd use that caring, attentive voice that had always made her feel loved and protected. But now she knew it was all an act. The man she'd married, the father of her unborn child, was living a double life, and Caroline Hayes was going to have to figure out what to do about it. The water was starting to cool, but Caroline didn't want to get out. Didn't want to face the bedroom, the bed she shared with a stranger, the life that had just crumbled around her. Tomorrow, she'd have to make decisions. Tonight, she just needed to survive. Monday morning, Hayes' family home in downtown Denver, Caroline woke up before dawn, her body aching from a restless night. She'd barely slept, lying rigid beside Nathaniel as he snored peacefully, completely unaware that his wife now knew the truth. Every time she'd started to drift off, images from his phone would flash through her mind. That woman's face, their intimate messages, the casual way they planned their next escape. At 5:30 a.m., she slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The morning routine that had once brought her comfort now felt like a performance she had to give. Coffee for Nathaniel, herbal tea for herself, toast with the pregnancy-safe jam her doctor had recommended. But as she stood at the counter, waiting for the coffee to brew, Caroline realized she couldn't do it. She couldn't pretend everything was normal. Not today. She needed help, and she needed it from someone who would tell her the truth without judgment. Caroline grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. David Reese, attorney at law. David had been a friend since college, and he'd handled the legal work when she and Nathaniel bought their house. More importantly, he specialized in family law. It was too early to call, but Caroline sent a text. "David, it's Caroline Hayes. I need to talk to you about something personal and urgent. Can we meet today? Please don't mention this to anyone." She hit send before she could change her mind. Upstairs, she heard Nathaniel's alarm go off. Soon he'd be down for breakfast, kissing her forehead, asking about her plans for the day. The thought made her stomach turn. Caroline's phone buzzed immediately. "David, of course. My office, 9 a.m., everything okay?" She typed back, "I'll be there." And no, everything's not okay. By the time Nathaniel came downstairs, showered and dressed in one of his perfectly pressed work shirts, Caroline had managed to compose herself. She even managed a small smile when he kissed her cheek. "You're up early," he observed, pouring himself coffee. "Couldn't sleep," Caroline said truthfully. "The baby was active all night." Nathaniel placed his hand on her belly, and Caroline had to fight not to pull away. Maybe she's going to be a night owl like her mom. The casual intimacy, the shared anticipation about their daughter's personality, it all felt like a cruel joke now. Caroline wondered if Nathaniel had talked to Veronica about the baby. Did his mistress know about Emma? Did she care that she was helping to destroy an unborn child's family? "I have some errands to run today," Caroline said as Nathaniel ate his breakfast. "Might be out for most of the afternoon. Anything I can help with?" he asked, glancing at his phone as it buzzed with what Caroline now recognized might be a message from V. "No, just boring stuff. Doctor appointments, baby shopping." It wasn't entirely a lie. She did have a doctor's appointment scheduled for Thursday, but today was about something much more important than routine prenatal care. After Nathaniel left for work, Caroline took a long shower and chose her clothes carefully. She wanted to look strong, composed, professional. Whatever David told her about her options, she needed to be ready to handle it with dignity. The drive to David's law office downtown gave her time to think about what she was going to say. How did you explain to someone that your seemingly perfect marriage was built on lies? How did you admit that you'd been so naive, so trusting? David Reese looked exactly the same as he had in college. Tall, lanky, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was neat and professional, with family photos on his desk and law books lining the walls. Caroline felt a wave of relief just being in a space where she could finally tell the truth. "Caroline," David said, standing to greet her with a gentle hug. "You look beautiful. How far along are you now?" 5 months, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "And Nathaniel? How's he handling the dad-to-be thing?" Caroline's carefully composed expression cracked. That's why I'm here, David." Over the next 30 minutes, Caroline told David everything. The strange behavior, the mysterious phone calls, the discovery on Sunday, the lies about the Aspen conference. She even showed him screenshots she'd taken of some of the messages, though her hands shook as she pulled them up on her phone. David listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When Caroline finished, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Caroline, I'm so sorry," he said finally. "This must be devastating. I need to know what my options are," Caroline said, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I can't live like this, pretending I don't know. But I'm pregnant, and we own a house together, and I don't know what any of this means legally." David pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "Okay, let's talk through this step by step. First, Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't need to prove adultery to file for divorce. But having evidence of infidelity can sometimes impact other aspects of the settlement." "Settlement?" Caroline felt overwhelmed. "David, I haven't even decided if I want a divorce. I just found out yesterday." "Of course," David said gently. "I'm just explaining your options. You don't have to make any decisions today, but I want you to understand what's possible." He walked her through the basics: property division, spousal support, child custody, child support. Each topic felt like a weight settling on Caroline's chest. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. It was about her daughter's future, her financial security, her entire life. "What about the house?" Caroline asked. "We bought it together, but I put down most of the down payment with money I inherited from my grandmother." "We can trace those funds and argue for your larger share of the equity," David said, "especially if you have documentation." Caroline nodded. Her grandmother's inheritance had been substantial, enough to secure their beautiful home in Highlands, the home where she'd planned to raise her daughter. "And the baby?" "Colorado presumes joint custody is in the child's best interest, but there are many factors that can influence that. We'd work to ensure any arrangement prioritizes your daughter's well-being and your ability to parent effectively." As they talked, Caroline felt a strange sense of empowerment growing alongside her fear. For the first time since discovering Nathaniel's affair, she felt like she had some control over her situation. "David, what would you do if this were your wife, your family?" David set down his pen and looked at her seriously. "Caroline, I've been practicing family law for 8 years. I've seen marriages survive infidelity and I've seen them end. The ones that survive require complete honesty, genuine remorse, and a lot of work from both partners. The ones that end, sometimes that's the healthiest choice for everyone involved." "But what about my daughter? She deserves to have her father in her life, and she will," David assured her. "Divorce doesn't mean Nathaniel disappears. It means you get to create a new structure for your family, one built on honesty instead of deception." Caroline left David's office with a folder full of information and a plan to think things over for a few days. But as she sat in her car in the parking garage, she realized something had shifted. She was no longer just the betrayed wife, drowning in shock and hurt. She was a woman with options, with rights, with the power to choose her own future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. "Hope your day is going well. Love you both." Caroline stared at the message for a long time. 3 weeks ago, it would have made her smile. Now it just reminded her of all the lies, all the casual deception he was capable of. She typed back, "Thanks. See you tonight." But as Caroline drove home through the busy Denver streets, she knew that tonight would be different. Tonight, she was going to stop being a victim and start being a woman who fought for herself and her daughter. The question was, what would that fight look like? Tuesday afternoon, Caroline's investigation and preparation. Caroline spent Tuesday morning doing something she'd never imagined herself capable of, conducting surveillance on her own husband. It felt surreal, sitting in her Honda Accord across the street from MedTech Solutions, watching the building where Nathaniel had worked for the past 4 years. She knew his schedule by heart: lunch break at 12:30, always at the same deli 2 blocks away, always back by 1:15. But today, at 12:35, Nathaniel emerged from the building talking animatedly on his phone. Even from a distance, Caroline could see the smile on his face, the relaxed way he walked. It was the same expression he'd worn in those photos with Veronica Sharp. He didn't head toward the deli. Instead, he walked 3 blocks in the opposite direction and disappeared into Bloom Cafe, an upscale coffee shop that Caroline knew served expensive salads and artisanal sandwiches. Not Nathaniel's usual scene at all. Caroline waited 5 minutes, then followed. Through the large windows of Bloom Cafe, she could see Nathaniel sitting at a corner table, his phone propped against a water glass, clearly on a video call. His body language was intimate, focused. He was leaning forward, occasionally laughing, completely absorbed in whoever was on the other side of that screen. Caroline's heart hammered as she realized what she was witnessing. This wasn't a business call. This was Nathaniel having a lunch date with Veronica Sharp, probably planning their next rendezvous while his pregnant wife sat in a car across the street. She took photos through the window with her phone, making sure to capture the timestamp, then drove home in a daze. Every red light felt like an eternity. By the time she pulled into their driveway, Caroline had made a decision that surprised even herself. She was going to find out everything she could about Veronica Sharp. Back home, Caroline opened her laptop and began what she would later think of as the most productive afternoon of her life. Social media had made it remarkably easy to learn about someone, especially someone who clearly enjoyed attention. Veronica Sharp was 29 years old and worked as a marketing coordinator for a luxury ski resort company based in Vail. Her Instagram profile was public, probably for professional reasons, and it painted a clear picture of her lifestyle. Expensive restaurants, designer workout clothes, weekend trips to mountain resorts. Her bio read, "Living my best life in the Rockies, marketing maven, adventure seeker, DM for collabs." Caroline scrolled through months of posts, feeling sick as she recognized locations from Nathaniel's recent business trips. There was Veronica at the same Aspen resort where Nathaniel had claimed to attend his conference, posted just 4 days ago. The caption read, "Perfect weekend getaway with my favorite person. Sometimes you meet someone who changes everything." Her favorite person. Caroline's hands clenched into fists as she continued scrolling. There were more photos, more clues. Veronica at restaurants Nathaniel had claimed to have visited for work meetings. Veronica wearing jewelry that looked expensive, the kind of jewelry that Caroline had noticed missing from their joint credit card statements, because Nathaniel had said it was client entertainment. But the post that made Caroline's blood run cold was from 2 months ago. A photo of Veronica holding a positive pregnancy test with the caption, "Plot twist, life is full of surprises. Blessed, new chapter." Caroline stared at the screen, her mind racing. 2 months ago. The timing didn't make sense unless. She scrolled frantically through more recent posts, looking for any mention of the pregnancy. There was nothing. No bump photos, no baby-related content after that initial announcement. Then, 3 weeks later, a cryptic post. "Sometimes life takes you in unexpected directions. Grateful for the journey, even when it's not the one you planned. Healing, now moving forward." Caroline sat back in her chair, processing what this might mean. Had Veronica lost the baby? Had she chosen not to continue the pregnancy? Either way, it explained something about the timeline of her relationship with Nathaniel. A terrible thought occurred to Caroline. What if Nathaniel had been seeing Veronica during Caroline's own struggles to conceive? What if he'd been leading a double life even longer than she'd imagined? Caroline's pregnancy app chimed on her phone, reminding her to take her prenatal vitamin. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, religiously taking care of the baby growing inside her, while her husband was apparently living an entirely separate life with another woman who had recently dealt with her own pregnancy situation. She needed more information, but she also needed to be smart about how she gathered it. Caroline had learned enough from her conversation with David to know that documentation would be crucial if this headed toward divorce proceedings. She created a new email account and began methodically saving evidence. Screenshots of Veronica's social media posts, photos she'd taken of Nathaniel at the cafe, copies of their text conversations that she'd photographed from his phone. She created folders, added dates, built what David would later call an impressively thorough case file. By 3 p.m., Caroline had compiled a timeline that made her feel both vindicated and nauseated. The affair had been going on for at least 4 months, possibly longer. It had involved multiple trips, expensive gifts, and a level of emotional intimacy that made Caroline's 7-year marriage feel like a joke. But she'd also discovered something else. Veronica Sharp wasn't just some random woman who had seduced Caroline's husband. She was ambitious, calculating, and clearly enjoyed the drama of being involved with a married man. Her social media presence was carefully curated to project success and desirability, but Caroline could see through the facade now. This was a woman who posted inspirational quotes about knowing your worth while pursuing a married man whose wife was pregnant. This was someone who tagged locations and used hashtags designed to be noticed, who seemed to thrive on attention and validation. And now Caroline understood something crucial. This wasn't just about passion or romance. For Veronica, Nathaniel was probably a step up, financially, socially, maybe professionally. She worked for a ski resort company. He worked in medical sales. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Vail, according to her tagged locations. He owned a beautiful home in one of Denver's most desirable neighborhoods. Veronica Sharp wasn't just the other woman. She was a woman with a plan. The revelation should have made Caroline angry, but instead it made her feel strangely calm. For the first time since Sunday, she felt like she understood what she was dealing with. This wasn't a simple case of her husband falling for someone accidentally. This was a calculated affair between two people who had both chosen to betray her. And now, Caroline was going to make some choices of her own. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. It was Jessica, her best friend. "Hey, stranger," Jessica said. "How about that coffee we talked about? I'm free now if you are." Caroline looked at her laptop screen, filled with evidence of her husband's betrayal, then at the clock. Nathaniel wouldn't be home for 3 hours. She had time to process this with someone she trusted before she had to face him again. "Actually," Caroline said, "coffee sounds perfect, but Jess, I need to tell you something, and it's not going to be easy to hear." "Oh, honey," Jessica said, and Caroline could hear the concern in her voice. "What's wrong? I'll tell you everything when I see you. Can you meet me at Grounds for Hope in 20 minutes? "Of course. Caroline, whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." As Caroline closed her laptop and gathered her things, she realized that for the first time in 3 days she felt like herself again. Not the naive wife who had been blindly trusting, not the devastated woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal, but Caroline Hayes, the woman who had put herself through college, built a successful career, and now had to protect herself and her unborn daughter. Nathaniel and Veronica Sharp thought they were so clever, conducting their affair while Caroline remained oblivious at home. But they had underestimated the woman they were betraying, and that, Caroline thought as she drove toward her meeting with Jessica, was going to be their biggest mistake. Tuesday afternoon. Grounds for Hope. Coffee shop, Denver. Jessica Martinez had been Caroline's closest friend since their sophomore year at University of Colorado. She was the kind of person who could read Caroline's mood from across a room, who had celebrated every milestone and weathered every crisis alongside her. But as Caroline walked into their favorite coffee shop, she realized this would be the hardest conversation they'd ever had. Jessica was already seated at their usual table by the window, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, still wearing her scrubs from her shift as a pediatric nurse at Denver Health. She stood to hug Caroline, but her smile faded immediately when she saw her friend's face. "Caroline, honey, you look exhausted. What's going on?" Caroline settled into her chair, grateful for the familiar warmth of the coffee shop, the smell of roasted beans and fresh pastries that had comforted her through college stress and career changes and wedding planning. Today, she needed that comfort more than ever. "Jess, I need you to listen to everything before you say anything, okay? Because if I stop talking, I might not be able to start again." Jessica's expression grew serious. She reached across the table and squeezed Caroline's hand. "Whatever it is, I'm here." Over the next 30 minutes, Caroline told her best friend everything. The suspicious behavior, the discovery on Sunday, the lies about Aspen, her meeting with David, her investigation into Veronica Sharp. She showed Jessica the photos, the social media screenshots, the timeline she'd created. Jessica listened without interruption, her face cycling through shock, anger, and protective fury. When Caroline finally finished, Jessica sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. "That son of a bitch," she said quietly. "That absolute son of a bitch." Caroline felt tears threatening again. Hearing someone else confirm her anger, validate her pain, it was exactly what she needed. "I can't believe he's been lying to your face while you're carrying his baby," Jessica continued. "And this Veronica woman? She's clearly a piece of work. Did you see how she posed in that resort photo? Like she was marking her territory." "What do I do, Jess?" Caroline asked. "I mean, I know what David says I can do legally, but emotionally, I don't know how to handle this." Jessica leaned forward, her nurse's instincts kicking in. "First, how are you feeling physically? Are you eating? Sleeping? Barely sleeping? I've been too sick to eat much. That's not good for you or the baby. We need to make sure you're taking care of yourself first." Jessica pulled out her phone. "I'm ordering you a sandwich and some of that pregnancy tea you like. You're going to eat it all." It was such a Jessica thing to do. Take charge of the practical details while Caroline dealt with the emotional crisis. It reminded Caroline why their friendship had lasted through everything. "Now," Jessica said after placing their order, "let's talk about what you want to happen here. Not what you should do, not what's legally smart. What do you actually want?" Caroline had been dreading this question because she wasn't sure she was ready to answer it honestly. "I want him to suffer," she said quietly. "I want him to feel as humiliated and betrayed as I do right now. I want Veronica to realize that breaking up a family has consequences. And I want my daughter to grow up knowing that her mother is strong enough to protect both of them." Jessica nodded slowly. "Those are all reasonable things to want. Now how do we make that happen in a way that doesn't destroy you in the process?" They spent the next hour developing what Jessica called Operation Dignity, a plan that would expose Nathaniel's affair while protecting Caroline's emotional and financial well-being. The key insight came from Jessica. "You said he goes to his parents' house every Monday for lunch, right? And they adore you. They always talk about what a perfect wife you are, how lucky Nathaniel is to have you." "Right," Caroline said. "His mother calls me at least twice a week to check on the pregnancy. She's already planning the baby shower. So what if they knew the truth about their precious son? Not from gossip or rumors, but directly from you with proof they couldn't deny." Caroline felt something click into place. Nathaniel's parents, Robert and Helen Hayes, were traditional religious people who valued family and commitment above everything else. They had welcomed Caroline into their family completely, treating her like the daughter they'd never had. More importantly, they held significant influence over Nathaniel. He still sought their approval in everything, still craved their respect. It was one of the things Caroline had always found endearing about their relationship, how much he valued his parents' opinion. They would be devastated, Caroline said, but they would also be furious with him. Exactly. And if you approach this right, they'll see you as the victim and him as the one who violated everything they raised him to believe in. Caroline's mind was racing. I could go there next Monday, when I know he'll be there for lunch. I could have all the evidence ready, present it to all of them at once. Think about it, Jessica said. No screaming matches in your home, no private confrontations where he can manipulate the narrative. Just you, him, his parents, and the truth. It was brilliant. Nathaniel would be trapped, unable to deny the evidence, unable to charm his way out of it, forced to face the consequences of his actions in front of the people whose opinion mattered most to him. And what about Veronica? Caroline asked. Jessica's smile was fierce. Well, she seems to love posting about her life on social media. What happens when Nathaniel's family finds out about her? When his parents make it clear that she's not welcome in their son's life? When her perfect Instagram relationship becomes a source of family drama and social embarrassment? Caroline felt something she hadn't experienced since Sunday. Hope. Not hope that her marriage could be saved, that ship had sailed, but hope that she could navigate this crisis with dignity, that she could protect her daughter's future, that Nathaniel and Veronica would face real consequences for their choices. There's one more thing, Jessica said carefully. You need to be prepared for the possibility that this gets ugly, that Nathaniel tries to turn this around on you somehow, or that Veronica retaliates. People don't like being exposed. Caroline nodded. She'd thought about this too. David said to document everything, to always take the high road, to never give them ammunition to use against me. Smart. And Caroline, you need to remember that whatever happens next, you didn't cause this. You're not responsible for his choices or her choices. You're just responsible for how you handle it moving forward. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Caroline felt something she hadn't felt in days. Clarity. She had a plan, she had support, and she had evidence. Most importantly, she had her self-respect back. Jess, Caroline said as they hugged goodbye in the parking lot, thank you for listening, for helping me think through this, for not judging me for not seeing it sooner. Caroline Hayes, Jessica said firmly, you are one of the strongest, smartest, most caring people I know. Nathaniel is an idiot for risking what he had with you. And when this is all over, you're going to be okay. Better than okay. As Caroline drove home, she felt nervous but determined. Monday was 5 days away. That gave her time to prepare, to organize her evidence, to practice what she was going to say. Most importantly, it gave her time to prepare emotionally for the moment when her marriage would officially end, not with a private conversation or a gradual separation, but with the truth laid bare in front of everyone who mattered. Nathaniel and Veronica thought they were playing a game where only they knew the rules, but Caroline was about to change the game entirely, and this time, she was going to win. Wednesday through Sunday, the Hayes household. The next 5 days were the longest of Caroline's life. She moved through her daily routine like an actress playing a role, smiling when Nathaniel kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asking about his day when he came home, discussing baby names and nursery decorations as if their world wasn't about to implode. But beneath the surface, Caroline was methodically preparing for war. Wednesday morning, while Nathaniel was at work, she drove to the bank and opened a new checking account in her name only. She transferred half of their joint savings, money that was legally hers to take according to David, and set up direct deposit for her freelance marketing consulting income. She wasn't planning to drain their accounts or hide assets, but she wanted to ensure she had access to funds if Nathaniel tried to freeze her out financially. She also retrieved important documents from their home safe: her birth certificate, passport, social security card, and copies of their tax returns. She stored everything in a safety deposit box at a different bank, along with printed copies of all the evidence she'd gathered about the affair. Thursday brought her routine prenatal appointment with Dr. Amanda Foster. As Dr. Foster checked the baby's heartbeat and measured Caroline's growing belly, Caroline felt a strange disconnect between the joy she should have been feeling and the reality of her situation. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Foster said with a warm smile. "Baby's measuring right on track, heartbeat is strong. How are you feeling? Any concerns?" Caroline almost laughed at the question. Where would she even begin? "I've been having trouble sleeping," she said carefully. "Some stress at home." Dr. Foster's expression grew more serious. "What kind of stress? Is there anything I can help with?" Caroline considered confiding in her doctor but decided against it. Soon enough, everyone would know about her situation. For now, she just needed to get through the next few days. "Nothing I can't handle," Caroline said. "Just normal life stuff." "Well, try to take care of yourself. Stress isn't good for you or the baby. Consider some relaxation techniques: prenatal yoga, meditation, warm baths. And if you need to talk to someone, I can recommend some excellent counselors who work with pregnant women." Caroline nodded, thinking that she'd probably need that counselor recommendation sooner than Dr. Foster imagined. Friday evening brought the week's biggest challenge: dinner with Nathaniel's parents. It was Helen Hayes' 62nd birthday, and they were celebrating at Robert and Helen's house in Littleton, the same house where Caroline planned to expose Nathaniel's affair on Monday. As they drove to his parents' house, Nathaniel seemed unusually chatty, talking about work projects and weekend plans. Caroline wondered if he was overcompensating for something, or if he was just excited about seeing Veronica later. She'd noticed he'd been texting more frequently this week, always stepping into another room to take calls. "You seem quiet tonight," Nathaniel said as they pulled into his parents' driveway. "Everything okay?" Caroline looked at the house where she'd spent countless Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and family gatherings over the past 7 years. On Monday, she would walk through that front door carrying evidence that would destroy the perfect family image the Hayes had worked so hard to maintain. "Just thinking about the baby," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Wondering what kind of life we're going to give her." Nathaniel reached over and squeezed her hand. "She's going to have a great life, Car. 2 parents who love her, a beautiful home, grandparents who already spoil her rotten." The casual confidence in his voice made Caroline's stomach turn. How could he talk about their daughter's future when he was actively destroying their family? Helen Hayes greeted them at the door with her usual enthusiasm, immediately pulling Caroline into a warm hug and exclaiming over how radiant she looked. Robert Hayes shook Nathaniel's hand and kissed Caroline's cheek, asking about her latest freelance projects. Over dinner, the conversation flowed naturally through familiar topics: Helen's garden, Robert's golf game, Nathaniel's work, Caroline's pregnancy symptoms. It was the kind of comfortable family dinner that Caroline had always treasured, but tonight it felt like an elaborate performance. "Have you started thinking about names?" Helen asked as she served her famous chocolate birthday cake. "I know it's early, but I'm so excited to start planning the nursery theme." "We like Emma," Nathaniel said, placing his hand on Caroline's belly. "Emma Rose Hayes." "Oh, that's beautiful," Helen said, tearing up. "Rose was my mother's middle name." Caroline watched the genuine joy on Helen's face and felt a stab of guilt about what she was going to do to this woman on Monday. But then she reminded herself, she wasn't the one destroying this family. Nathaniel was. "Caroline, dear," Robert said, "how are you feeling about the whole parenthood thing? Ready to be a mom?" Caroline met his eyes across the table. Robert Hayes was a good man, honest, hardworking, devoted to his family. He'd raised his son to value the same things, or at least he thought he had. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes to protect my daughter," Caroline said carefully, "to make sure she grows up knowing right from wrong, and that there are consequences for our choices." "That's exactly right," Robert said approvingly. Too many kids these days don't understand accountability. Helen and I tried to raise Nathaniel to be honest and responsible. Seems like it worked. Nathaniel smiled at the praise, and Caroline had to grip her water glass to keep from saying something she'd regret. In 3 days, Robert Hayes would discover exactly how his parenting had worked. The evening ended with Helen sending them home with leftover cake and promises to call about baby shower planning. As they drove home, Nathaniel seemed relaxed and happy. "That was nice," he said. "Mom and Dad are so excited about the baby. I think Dad's already planning to teach her golf." Caroline nodded, watching Denver's lights blur past the car window. "They're going to be good grandparents." "The best," Nathaniel agreed. "I'm glad our daughter will have such a strong family foundation." Saturday and Sunday passed in a blur of ordinary domestic activities. Nathaniel worked in the yard. Caroline did laundry and meal prep. They watched movies, discussed Caroline's cravings for pickles and ice cream, and debated whether to paint the nursery yellow or wait to find out the baby's gender. To any outside observer, they looked like a happy couple preparing for their first child. But Caroline felt like she was living in a parallel universe, going through the motions of her old life while preparing for her new one. Sunday night, as Nathaniel showered before bed, Caroline sat in their bedroom and reviewed her plan one final time. Tomorrow, she would drive to Robert and Helen's house at 11:45 a.m., knowing that Nathaniel would arrive at noon for their traditional Monday lunch. She would present her evidence calmly and factually, let them process the information, and then she would leave. What happened after that would be up to Nathaniel and his family. Caroline's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Thinking of you tonight. You've got this. Remember, you're not destroying anything. You're just revealing what's already broken." Caroline typed back, "Thank you. See you tomorrow evening?" "Absolutely. I'll have wine for me and chocolate ice cream for you." As Caroline got ready for bed, she felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would change everything, but she was ready. She'd spent 5 days preparing not just logistically, but emotionally. She knew what she was going to say, how she was going to say it, and what she hoped to accomplish. Nathaniel climbed into bed beside her, scrolling through his phone one last time before putting it on his nightstand. Caroline caught a glimpse of his screen and saw what looked like a text conversation with a heart emoji. "Good night, babe," Nathaniel said, kissing her forehead. "Love you both. Good night," Caroline replied. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to her husband's breathing slow into sleep, Caroline knew this would be the last night she'd ever go to bed believing in their marriage. Tomorrow, everything would finally be out in the open. And despite everything that was about to be destroyed, Caroline felt something she hadn't experienced in over a week. Peace. The lies would finally stop, and Caroline Hayes could finally start rebuilding her life on a foundation of truth. Monday, 11:45 a.m., the Hayes family home. Littleton Caroline sat in her car outside Robert and Helen Hayes' modest 2-story home, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The manila folder containing printed evidence of Nathaniel's affair sat on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. In 15 minutes, her marriage would be over. In 15 minutes, the Hayes family would never be the same. She could still change her mind. She could drive home, confront Nathaniel privately, try to work through this like the marriage counselors always recommended. But as she looked at the house where she'd spent so many happy occasions, Caroline reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't just about her pain. This was about her daughter's future, about creating consequences for betrayal, about refusing to be the only person in her marriage who was committed to honesty. At 11:50, Caroline walked up the familiar stone pathway and knocked on the front door. Helen answered almost immediately, her face lighting up with surprise and delight. "Caroline, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Helen Hayes was exactly the type of mother-in-law Caroline had always hoped for. Warm, generous, genuinely caring. She'd been the one to help Caroline through her father's death 3 years ago. The one who'd cried with joy when Caroline and Nathaniel announced their pregnancy. In a few minutes, Caroline was going to break this woman's heart. "I'm okay, Helen," Caroline said, stepping into the familiar living room with its family photos and Helen's carefully tended houseplants. "Is Robert here? I need to talk to both of you about something important." "Of course, dear. He's just finishing up some paperwork in his study. Let me get him." Helen's expression grew concerned. "Is everything all right? Is it the baby?" "The baby is fine," Caroline assured her. "But we need to talk." Robert Hayes emerged from his study, still wearing his reading glasses, looking pleased to see his daughter-in-law. At 65, he was a distinguished man who'd worked as a high school principal for 30 years before retiring. He'd taught Caroline to change a tire, had walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't be there, and had always treated her like his own daughter. "Caroline, this is a nice surprise," Robert said, kissing her cheek. "What brings you by on a Monday?" "Please, both of you, sit down," Caroline said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I have something to show you, and it's going to be difficult to hear." Helen and Robert exchanged worried glances as they settled onto their familiar beige couch. Caroline remained standing, the folder in her hands, knowing that once she opened it, there would be no going back. "Before I show you this," Caroline began, "I want you to know that I love you both. You've been more than in-laws to me, you've been parents. And I'm telling you this because I respect you too much to let you continue believing a lie." The concern in Helen's eyes was shifting to alarm. "Caroline, honey, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" Caroline opened the folder and handed them the first photo, the picture from Veronica's Instagram of her and Nathaniel at the Aspen Resort. "Nathaniel wasn't at a medical conference last weekend," Caroline said quietly. "He was with her." The silence that followed felt endless. Helen stared at the photo, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then devastation. Robert took the photo from his wife's trembling hands, studied it for a long moment, then looked up at Caroline with an expression she'd never seen before. "Who is she?" Robert asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Her name is Veronica Sharp. She's 29, works for a ski resort company in Vail." Caroline handed them more photos, more evidence. "They've been seeing each other for at least 4 months. While I've been pregnant with your grandchild, your son has been taking romantic trips with another woman." Helen was crying now, soft sobs that she was trying to muffle with her hand. "Caroline, there has to be some mistake. Nathaniel would never." "Mom, there's no mistake." All three of them turned toward the front door. Nathaniel stood in the entryway, his face pale, his lunch forgotten in a bag that had fallen from his hand. He must have seen Caroline's car in the driveway and come in through the front door instead of the kitchen entrance he usually used. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Caroline had imagined this moment dozens of times over the past week, but the reality was somehow both better and worse than her expectations. Better because Nathaniel couldn't deny what they were all looking at. Worse because she could see the exact moment her in-laws' hearts broke. "Nathaniel James Hayes," Helen said, her voice shaking with a mixture of grief and fury Caroline had never heard before. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't done this to Caroline, to your unborn child, to our family." Nathaniel's mouth opened and closed several times. Caroline could see him calculating, trying to find a way to explain or minimize what they'd discovered. But the evidence was overwhelming, and he knew it. "I can explain," he said finally. "Explain?" Robert's voice was like ice. Caroline had never heard him speak to Nathaniel with anything but love and pride, but now his disappointment filled the room like a physical presence. "Explain how you betrayed the woman who's carrying your child. Explain how you lied to our faces every Sunday for months." "Dad, it's not what?" Robert stood up, and Caroline was reminded that he'd spent 30 years dealing with lying teenagers. "It's not adultery? It's not deception? Help me understand, son, because right now I'm looking at a man I don't recognize." Caroline watched Nathaniel crumble under his father's judgment in a way she'd never seen before. For the first time since she'd discovered his affair, she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Not for hurting her, but for disappointing the people whose opinion mattered most to him. "Caroline," Nathaniel said, turning to her desperately, "we can work through this. It doesn't have to—" "No," Caroline said firmly. "We can't. And it does." She pulled the divorce papers from her folder, the ones David had prepared for her on Friday, and placed them on the coffee table. "I've filed for divorce. You'll be served officially later this week, but I wanted your parents to hear this from me first. I wanted them to know that I didn't make this decision lightly, and that I did everything I could to be a good wife to you." Helen was openly sobbing now. "Caroline, please. Maybe counseling, maybe—" "Helen," Caroline said gently, sitting down next to her mother-in-law and taking her hands. "I'm 5 months pregnant, while I've been growing your grandchild, planning our future, trusting my husband completely. He's been planning romantic getaways with another woman. There's no coming back from that." Robert's voice was barely controlled. "How long?" "At least 4 months," Caroline answered. "Probably longer." 4 months. Robert looked at his son with disgust. 4 months of lying to everyone who loves you. 4 months of deceiving a pregnant woman. 4 months of making fools of your mother and me every time we bragged about what a good husband you were. I never meant for this to happen, Nathaniel said weakly. But it did happen, Caroline said, standing up, and now we all have to deal with the consequences. She looked around the living room one last time, at the family photos that would need to be updated, at Helen's tears, at Robert's rigid disappointment, at Nathaniel's pathetic attempts to find words that could fix this. I'm going to go now, Caroline said. Helen, Robert, I hope we can maintain a relationship for the baby's sake. She's going to need her grandparents. Of course, Helen managed through her tears. Caroline, you'll always be family to us. Always. And Caroline, Robert said, his voice heavy with emotion, I want you to know that what my son has done doesn't represent the values we tried to raise him with. You deserve better than this. You and that baby deserve so much better. Caroline nodded, feeling tears threaten for the first time since she'd walked into the house. Thank you, both of you. As she walked toward the door, Nathaniel followed her. Caroline, wait, please. Can we talk about this privately? Caroline turned to face her husband for what she knew would be the last time as his wife. There's nothing left to talk about, Nathaniel. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. What about Veronica? Helen asked suddenly. Is she coming to our family gatherings now? Are we supposed to welcome the woman who destroyed our son's marriage? Caroline almost felt sorry for Nathaniel as he realized what his parents were really asking. They weren't just losing Caroline and their grandchild's stable home. They were being forced to either accept his mistress or lose their son entirely. That's between you and Nathaniel, Caroline said. But you should know that she posted photos of their Aspen trip on Instagram with captions about how excited she was to be with a man who made her feel special. She knew he was married. She knew I was pregnant. And she didn't care. The disgust on Robert and Helen's faces was complete. Caroline had given them everything they needed to make their own judgments about Veronica Sharp. As Caroline drove away from the Hayes house for the last time, she saw Nathaniel in her rearview mirror, standing in the driveway looking lost and defeated. She felt many things: sadness, relief, anger, hope, but not guilt. She'd done what she came to do. The truth was finally out. And now, for the first time in over a week, Caroline Hayes could start building a life based on honesty instead of lies. The hardest part was over. Everything else was just paperwork. Monday afternoon through Wednesday, Denver Caroline drove straight from the Hayes house to Jessica's apartment, her hands shaking so badly she had to pull over twice to compose herself. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and raw emotional pain. Jessica took one look at Caroline's face and immediately pulled her inside, settling her on the couch with a cup of herbal tea and a plate of the cookies she'd stress-baked that morning. Tell me everything, Jessica said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the couch. Caroline recounted the entire scene: Helen's tears, Robert's controlled fury, Nathaniel's pathetic attempts at explanation, the moment when his parents realized they'd been defending a lie for months. How do you feel? Jessica asked when Caroline finished. Empty, Caroline said honestly. Like I just watched my entire life explode and I'm not sure what's left. But also relieved? Caroline considered this. Yes. God, yes. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to wonder where he really is or what he's really doing. The truth is finally out there. And now the real work begins, Jessica said gently. Rebuilding your life the way you want it. Caroline's phone had been buzzing constantly since she'd left Littleton. 17 missed calls from Nathaniel. 12 text messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations to pleading for one conversation to explain everything. She'd also received 3 calls from Helen Hayes, 2 from Robert, and, most surprisingly, a text from David Reese. Heard from opposing counsel. Nathaniel wants to talk settlement. You must have made quite an impression. Call me when you're ready. He's already lawyering up, Caroline told Jessica, showing her David's message. Smart of him. Probably realized he doesn't have much of a defense. Tuesday morning brought Caroline's first taste of single life in 7 years. She woke up alone in her own bed. Nathaniel had apparently spent the night somewhere else, possibly with Veronica, possibly at a hotel. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Caroline, I know you don't want to talk to me right now, but please don't make any permanent decisions without giving us a chance to work through this. I love you. I love our daughter. This doesn't have to destroy our family. Caroline crumpled the note and threw it away. Then she called David. Caroline, David's voice was professional but warm. How are you holding up? I've been better. What's this about Nathaniel wanting to settle? His attorney called yesterday evening. Apparently, your husband is motivated to resolve this quickly and quietly. No contested divorce, no drawn-out custody battle. He's willing to be generous with the settlement in exchange for discretion, though we're still looking at the standard 91-day waiting period Colorado requires. Caroline almost laughed. Discretion? His parents know. They're probably telling everyone by now. What discretion is left? I think he's worried about his professional reputation, his social circle. A messy public divorce could affect his career, especially if the affair becomes widely known. And what exactly is he offering? David outlined Nathaniel's preliminary proposal. Caroline would keep the house, receive generous spousal support for 2 years, and have primary custody of their daughter, with Nathaniel getting standard visitation rights. In exchange, Caroline would agree to keep details of the affair private and not seek additional damages. It's actually a fair offer, David said. Better than fair, given that Colorado is a no-fault state. He's essentially giving you everything you want to make this go away quietly. What do you recommend? I recommend we negotiate some specifics. I'd like to see that spousal support extended to 5 years, and we should nail down exactly what discretion means. But Caroline, this is a good starting point. It suggests he knows he screwed up and wants to make it right financially, even if he can't make it right personally. That afternoon, Caroline met with a realtor Jessica had recommended. If she was keeping the house, she wanted to understand her options for refinancing the mortgage in her name only, and possibly making changes that would help her start fresh. Sharon Webb was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in helping women through divorce transitions. She took one look at Caroline's situation and immediately started making suggestions. "This is a beautiful home," Sharon said, as they walked through the rooms Caroline had carefully decorated over 7 years. "Great neighborhood, excellent schools when your daughter gets older. But I'm wondering, do you want to stay here?" Caroline paused in the nursery she'd been preparing with such joy just 2 weeks ago. The yellow walls suddenly seemed cheerful, rather than optimistic, and she could imagine herself and Emma making new memories here. "I think I do," Caroline said. "This is my home too. I shouldn't have to give it up because he made bad choices." "That's exactly right. And with the equity you've built up, refinancing should be straightforward. We could even look at renovating. Maybe update the master bedroom, make it feel completely different." The idea of changing the space she'd shared with Nathaniel appealed to Caroline immensely. She could redecorate, rearrange, create something that was entirely hers and Emma's. Wednesday brought Caroline's biggest surprise yet, a phone call from Helen Hayes. "Caroline, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I needed to hear your voice." "Of course, Helen. How are you doing?" Helen's voice was shaky but determined. "Robert and I have been talking, and we want you to know that our feelings about you haven't changed. You're still our daughter-in-law until this divorce is final, and you'll always be Emma's grandmother. We don't want Nathaniel's mistakes to cost us our relationship with you or our granddaughter." Caroline felt tears welling up. "That means everything to me, Helen. I was so worried that I'd lost you both too." "Never," Helen said firmly. "And Caroline, we told Nathaniel that he's not welcome in our home until he's prepared to take full responsibility for what he's done. No excuses, no justifications. We won't enable his behavior by pretending this is somehow a mutual failure." Caroline was stunned. "Helen, you don't have to choose sides. We're not choosing sides, dear. We're choosing principles. Robert and I raised our son to be honest and faithful. He chose to ignore those values. There are consequences to that. What about Veronica?" Helen's voice hardened. "That woman is not welcome in our family, ever. We've made that very clear to Nathaniel. If he wants to continue his relationship with her, he'll have to do it without our blessing or support." After hanging up with Helen, Caroline sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd discovered Nathaniel's betrayal just 10 days ago, and realized something profound had shifted. She wasn't just the victim of infidelity anymore. She was a woman building a new life, with the support of people who truly cared about her, and the financial means to create the future she wanted for herself and her daughter. Her phone buzzed with another text from Nathaniel. "Please call me. Veronica and I broke up. It's over with her. Can we please talk about saving our marriage?" Caroline stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whether or not Nathaniel and Veronica were still together was irrelevant. The damage was done, the trust was destroyed, and Caroline had already moved beyond trying to salvage what they'd had. Instead, she opened her laptop and started researching prenatal yoga classes and mommy groups in her area. If she was going to be a single mother, she wanted to build a community of support around herself and Emma. For the first time since discovering the affair, Carolyn felt something that had nothing to do with Nathaniel or his choices. Excitement. Excitement about the future she was going to build, about the woman she was becoming, about the life she was going to give her daughter. The hardest part was behind her. Now came the part where she proved to herself, and to everyone watching, that Caroline Hayes was strong enough to thrive on her own terms. And as she browsed websites for new mother support groups and made notes about nursery redesigns, Caroline realized she was actually looking forward to finding out just how strong she could be. 6 weeks later, summer in Denver. Caroline stood in what used to be her and Nathaniel's bedroom, now completely transformed. The dark furniture they'd chosen together had been replaced with a light oak dresser and nightstand. The deep blue walls were now a soft sage green. Even the bedding was different, cheerful white linens with yellow accents that made the room feel bright and hopeful. At 6.5 months pregnant, Caroline's belly had rounded considerably, and she found herself talking to Emma more frequently as she went about her daily routines. "What do you think about the new paint color, baby girl?" she said, running her hand over her bump. "Mommy thinks it's much more peaceful than before." The divorce proceedings had moved as quickly as Colorado law allowed. With the mandatory 91-day waiting period, they were still 2 weeks away from the final decree, but the settlement terms had been agreed upon the previous week. Caroline would keep the house, receive a substantial financial settlement, and have primary custody of Emma, with Nathaniel getting every other weekend and 1 evening per week once the baby was old enough for extended visits. More importantly, the social consequences of Nathaniel's affair had been significant, though mixed. Word had spread through their social circle, partly through the Hayes family grapevine, partly through Veronica's own social media activity. While some friends had distanced themselves from Nathaniel, others remained neutral or even supportive, believing there were two sides to every story. The uncertainty of who to trust had become almost as exhausting as the divorce itself. Caroline's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Helen Hayes, who had become even more attentive during the pregnancy than before the divorce. "Caroline, dear, how are you feeling? Any contractions or unusual symptoms?" Helen had taken it upon herself to become Caroline's pregnancy support system, attending doctor's appointments when invited, and helping prepare for the baby's arrival. Her relationship with Nathaniel remained strained. She and Robert spoke to their son only when necessary, and they had made it clear that his choices had consequences that extended far beyond his marriage. "I'm fine, Helen. Actually feeling pretty good today. I finished redecorating the bedroom." "Oh, wonderful. I can't wait to see it. And how's little Emma doing?" "Active as always. I swear she's training for the Olympics in there." Helen laughed, and Caroline could hear the genuine joy in her voice. Despite everything that had happened, Emma's impending arrival had given Helen something positive to focus on. "Caroline, I have some news I thought you should know," Helen said, her tone becoming more serious. "Robert ran into Nathaniel's old colleague Mike Thompson at the grocery store yesterday. Apparently there's been some gossip at Nathaniel's office." Caroline sat down in her new reading chair by the window. "What kind of gossip?" "Well, it seems that Veronica has been calling his office, which has been awkward for everyone, and word about the divorce has gotten around. Mike said Nathaniel's been having some challenges professionally. A couple of his bigger clients have started questioning his reliability, though most of his work relationships remain intact." Caroline felt a complicated mix of emotions. She'd never wanted Nathaniel's career to suffer, but she also couldn't pretend she was sorry that his actions had real consequences. "How's he handling it?" "Not well, according to Mike. Apparently he's been telling people that you were unreasonable, that you wouldn't give him a chance to fix things, but most people know you, Caroline. They know what kind of person you are. No one's buying his version of events." This was exactly what Caroline had hoped would happen. Not that Nathaniel would be destroyed, but that people would see his behavior for what it was and judge accordingly. "And Veronica?" Helen's voice hardened. "From what we understand, she's been posting increasingly dramatic messages on social media about love conquering all and fighting for what's meant to be. It's embarrassing, frankly, for both of them." After hanging up with Helen, Caroline made herself lunch and settled in to review the responses to her online classified ad for a part-time marketing consultant position. She'd decided to expand her freelance business, building a client base that would give her flexibility as a single mother, while still maintaining her professional identity. 3 potential clients had responded to her latest outreach, including a small nonprofit that worked with pregnant teenagers, a cause that resonated with Caroline's new understanding of how challenging single motherhood could be. As she worked, Caroline reflected on how different her life looked now compared to 6 weeks ago. She woke up each morning without dread, without wondering what lies she might discover, or what mood Nathaniel might be in. Her days were peaceful, productive, and entirely her own. The doorbell rang, interrupting her work. Through the peephole, Caroline was surprised to see a young woman she didn't recognize. Blonde, nervous-looking, standing on her front porch with what appeared to be a manila envelope. Caroline hesitated, then opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" "Are you Caroline Hayes?" the woman asked. She was probably in her early 20s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was here against her better judgment. "Yes, who's asking?" "My name is Betrayal Nash. I work with Veronica Sharp at the resort company. I think I need to tell you something." Caroline's heart started beating faster. "What kind of something? Can I come in? Please? I have information you might want to know about what's been going on." Against her better judgment, Caroline let Betrayal inside, leading her to the living room and offering her water or tea. Betrayal was clearly nervous, fidgeting with the envelope in her hands. "I don't know if I should be here," Betrayal began, "but I've been watching what's been happening with Veronica, and I think you deserve to know the truth about some things." "What truth?" Betrayal opened the envelope and pulled out printed emails and text message screenshots. "Veronica's been planning this whole thing for months. She researched your husband online, found out where he worked, arranged to meet him at a conference. This wasn't some accidental affair. She targeted him specifically." Caroline stared at the papers Betrayal handed her. The emails showed Veronica discussing Nathaniel with friends, calling him a perfect mark. Married, successful, seemingly unhappy enough to be vulnerable to attention from an attractive younger woman. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Veronica's been bragging about it at work, about how she was going to upgrade her life by getting with a married man with money. She said wives like you were naive and boring, and that she could easily take your place." Caroline felt a cold rage building in her chest. Take my place? She had this whole plan. She was going to get pregnant, make him leave you, and then she'd have the house, the lifestyle, everything. When that didn't work out, Betrayal gestured vaguely. She's been getting more desperate, more reckless. The papers showed text conversations between Veronica and her friends, detailing her strategy for seducing Nathaniel, her timeline for breaking up his marriage, even her research into the value of Caroline and Nathaniel's house. "Betrayal, why are you giving me this? What do you get out of it?" Betrayal looked down at her hands. "My mom went through something similar when I was in high school. Some woman targeted my dad, broke up my family. I watched my mom blame herself for years, thinking she wasn't good enough or smart enough to keep her husband. I don't want you to do that to yourself." Caroline sat back in her chair, processing what she'd learned. Nathaniel hadn't just made a mistake or fallen for someone accidentally. He'd been deliberately manipulated by a woman who had specifically chosen to destroy Caroline's family for her own gain. "What's Veronica doing now?" Caroline asked. "Still trying to get him back. She's convinced that if you weren't in the picture, he'd marry her. She doesn't understand that he was never going to leave you voluntarily. She was just entertainment for him." As Betrayal prepared to leave, she handed Caroline one final piece of paper. "This is a screenshot from yesterday. Thought you should see it." It was a social media post from Veronica. "Some people give up on love too easily. Real love fights for what it wants, no matter what obstacles are in the way. The best things in life are worth waiting for. Never give up. True love. Destined together." Caroline almost felt sorry for Veronica as she read the desperate post. Almost. After Betrayal left, Caroline sat in her peaceful living room, surrounded by the life she'd rebuilt, and realized something important. She didn't need this information to validate her choices or make her feel better about the divorce. She'd already moved beyond caring about Veronica's motivations or Nathaniel's regrets, but she was glad to know the truth. It confirmed what she'd suspected from the beginning, that her husband hadn't just made a mistake. He'd been willing to throw away everything they'd built together for a woman who saw him as nothing more than a meal ticket. Caroline placed her hand on her belly as Emma kicked enthusiastically. "Don't worry, baby girl," she said softly. "Your mom is smarter than they thought, and you're going to grow up knowing exactly how strong women can be when they refuse to accept less than they deserve." The phone rang again. This time it was Jessica, calling to confirm their dinner plans for the evening. As Caroline chatted with her best friend about baby shower preparations and nursery decorating, she felt grateful for the life she was building. Nathaniel and Veronica could have each other, or not. It was no longer Caroline's problem. She had more important things to focus on, like raising her daughter and proving that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. 3 months later, Denver General Hospital. At 3:17 a.m. on a crisp October morning, Emma Rose Hayes entered the world with a powerful cry that made the delivery room nurses smile. Caroline, exhausted but exhilarated, held her daughter for the first time and felt a love so overwhelming it made every painful moment of the past 6 months disappear. "She's perfect," whispered Helen Hayes, who had been Caroline's labor coach and was now crying tears of joy as she watched her daughter-in-law become a mother. Absolutely perfect. Emma was indeed perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with Caroline's dark hair and what appeared to be Nathaniel's green eyes. But as Caroline looked into her daughter's face, she saw only the future, not the past. "Hello, my sweet girl," Caroline murmured. "I've been waiting to meet you." The next few hours passed in a blur of nurses, visitors, and the surreal adjustment to being responsible for this tiny human being. Jessica arrived with flowers and immediately started crying at the sight of Caroline holding Emma. Robert Hayes appeared with a gift bag full of pink outfits and a grandfather's proud smile. "Where's Nathaniel?" asked Dr. Foster, as she completed Caroline's post-delivery examination. "He's in the waiting room," Helen said carefully. Caroline decided she wanted family present for the delivery and, well, the situation is complicated. Caroline had made the decision weeks earlier. While she wouldn't prevent Nathaniel from meeting his daughter, she wasn't prepared to share Emma's birth moment with him. This was her victory, her joy, and she wanted to experience it surrounded only by people who had supported her through the hardest months of her life. Around noon, Caroline finally agreed to let Nathaniel visit. He appeared in the doorway of her private room looking nervous and uncertain, emotions Caroline had rarely seen from him before. The confident, charming man she'd married had been replaced by someone who looked like he'd been carrying the weight of his mistakes for months. "She's beautiful, Caroline," Nathaniel said quietly, approaching the bed where Caroline held their sleeping daughter. "She looks like you. She looks like herself," Caroline replied. "Would you like to hold her?" Nathaniel's hand shook as he carefully took Emma from Caroline's arms. For a moment, watching him gaze down at their daughter with wonder and love, Caroline could almost remember why she'd fallen for him 7 years ago. Almost. "I know I have no right to ask," Nathaniel said, not looking up from Emma's face. "But is there any chance at all that we could try again? For her sake?" Caroline had known this conversation was coming. She'd prepared for it during the long nights of her final month of pregnancy, when Emma's kicks had kept her awake and given her time to think about forgiveness, second chances, and what kind of example she wanted to set for her daughter. "No, Nathaniel," she said gently but firmly. "There isn't." "Caroline, please, I know I screwed up, but—" "You didn't screw up," Caroline interrupted. "Screwing up is forgetting to pick up milk or missing a doctor's appointment. What you did was make a deliberate choice to betray our family, multiple choices over months." Nathaniel finally looked at her, and Caroline could see genuine remorse in his eyes. Too little, too late, but at least it was real. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "My marriage, my family's respect, half my clients. Veronica turned out to be not who I thought she was." Caroline almost asked about Veronica, but decided she didn't care enough to waste the energy. She'd heard through Helen that the relationship had imploded spectacularly when Nathaniel couldn't deliver the lifestyle Veronica had been expecting. But Caroline found that she felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy about their drama. "You'll be a good father to Emma," Caroline said instead. "I believe that. But we're never going to be a family again, Nathaniel. I've moved on." And she had. Over the past 3 months, Caroline had built a life that felt more authentic and fulfilling than anything she'd experienced during her marriage. Her freelance business was thriving. She'd joined a new mother's support group, and she'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with David's colleague, Tom, who was divorced with 2 kids of his own and understood the complexities of single parenthood. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Strong enough to expose a cheating husband, navigate a divorce, start a business, and prepare for single motherhood, all while maintaining her dignity and kindness. "I want you to know," Nathaniel said as he prepared to leave, "that I'm grateful you handled everything the way you did. You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't." "I didn't do it for you," Caroline replied. "I did it for Emma." Someday she's going to ask questions about why her parents aren't together, and I want to be able to tell her that I took the high road. After Nathaniel left, Caroline settled in for her final night in the hospital. Emma slept peacefully in her bassinet beside the bed, occasionally making the soft sounds that newborns make. Caroline found herself unable to sleep, not from anxiety or pain, but from a sense of anticipation about the future that stretched ahead of them. Her phone buzzed with text messages from friends and family who had heard about Emma's arrival. Among them was an unexpected message from Brielle Nash. Saw the birth announcement on Facebook. Congratulations. Your daughter is lucky to have such a strong mother. P.S. Veronica's been having some issues at work lately. Her constant drama is catching up with her. Caroline deleted the message without responding. Veronica's fate was no longer her concern. The next morning, as Caroline prepared to take Emma home, Helen helped pack the hospital bags while Jessica took approximately 100 photos of grandmother and granddaughter. You know, Helen said as they waited for the discharge nurse, I'm proud of how you've handled all of this, the way you've kept your grace through such a difficult time. Emma is going to learn so much from watching you. I hope so, Caroline said, adjusting Emma's blanket. I want her to know that she never has to accept less than she deserves from anyone, that she's strong enough to stand up for herself and rebuild her life if she needs to. Oh, she'll know, Jessica said, snapping another photo. Look at the example she has. As Caroline carried Emma out of the hospital and into the bright October sunshine, she felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with giving birth and everything to do with having emerged from the darkest period of her life as a stronger, more authentic version of herself. The house that waited for them was truly theirs now, redecorated, refinanced, and filled with the promise of new memories. The nursery was ready, painted in soft greens and yellows with a white crib that had never been touched by the past. Caroline's support network was solid and genuine, built on honesty rather than obligation. And Emma, beautiful, perfect Emma, would grow up in a home where love was demonstrated through actions rather than words, where commitment meant something, and where her mother had shown that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is refuse to accept betrayal as acceptable. As Caroline buckled Emma into her car seat for the first time, she thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, naive, trusting, willing to overlook warning signs because she wanted to believe the best about people. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who was wiser, stronger, and infinitely more capable of protecting herself and her child. Ready to go home, baby girl? Caroline asked, looking at Emma's peaceful face in the rearview mirror. Emma responded with a tiny yawn, and Caroline laughed. The first truly carefree laugh she'd had in months. The road ahead would have challenges, but Caroline was no longer afraid of them. She'd proven to herself that she could handle whatever life threw at her, and now with Emma beside her, she was ready to build the kind of future that was based on truth, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that some things, like self-respect and authentic love, were worth fighting for. As they drove through the familiar streets of Denver toward their home, Caroline Hayes smiled. The hardest chapter of her life was over, and the best one was just beginning. 2 years later, fall 2027, Highland neighborhood, Denver. Caroline Hayes Marshall stood in her backyard, watching 24-month-old Emma toddle around the autumn garden while babbling in her own special language. The little girl had her father's green eyes but her mother's determined spirit, something that became more apparent every day as Emma approached her terrible twos with fearless curiosity and an iron will. "Mama, look," Emma called out, proudly holding up a fallen orange leaf. At exactly 2 years old, she was walking confidently and had a vocabulary that impressed everyone who met her. "That's beautiful, baby," Caroline said, accepting the wilted flower with the same enthusiasm she'd show for a dozen roses. "Should we put it in water?" Caroline's wedding ring, a simple gold band that matched the engagement ring Tom Marshall had given her 6 months ago, caught the afternoon sunlight as she helped Emma examine their flowers. The engagement had been a quiet affair, nothing like the elaborate production her first wedding had been. This time Caroline had chosen a man who demonstrated his love through daily kindness rather than grand gestures, who had spent a year proving his commitment before they'd even discussed marriage. Tom was at a Little League game with his 8-year-old son Logan, but he'd be home soon for their traditional Sunday family dinner. Caroline's life now included scheduled chaos, co-parenting with Tom's ex-wife, an amicable arrangement that Caroline had learned to navigate, Emma's visits with Nathaniel every other weekend, and the beautiful complexity of blending two families built on honesty rather than illusion. Her phone rang and Caroline smiled when she saw Helen's name on the screen. "Hi, Helen. How are you and Robert doing?" "We're wonderful, dear. Just wanted to check on our favorite granddaughter. Is she ready for our zoo trip next Saturday?" Helen and Robert Hayes had remained central figures in Emma's life, having embraced their role as devoted grandparents while maintaining a carefully polite but distant relationship with their own son. They'd never fully forgiven Nathaniel for his choices, though they'd gradually rebuilt a functional relationship focused entirely on Emma's well-being. "She's been talking about the elephants all week," Caroline said, watching Emma chase a butterfly with determined focus. "Fair warning, she's learned the word why and uses it approximately 50 times per hour." Helen laughed, just like her mother at that age. "Caroline, I have some news you might find interesting, though I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear it." "What kind of news?" "Robert ran into Nathaniel's old boss at the hardware store yesterday. Apparently Nathaniel's been working to rebuild his reputation. He's doing okay professionally, but it's been slower going than he expected. Some bridges take time to rebuild." Caroline felt a familiar lack of emotional response to news about her ex-husband. 2 years of healing had taught her that Nathaniel's struggles weren't her responsibility, just as his successes wouldn't be her victory. "And there's more," Helen continued carefully. "That woman, Veronica, she's been trying to contact him again. Apparently she's had some kind of financial troubles and thinks he might help her out." "Is he going to?" "From what we understand, absolutely not. He told her he's learned his lesson about getting involved with manipulative people." Caroline almost felt sorry for Veronica Sharp. Almost. The woman who had calculated plans to steal another woman's husband had discovered that actions have consequences, though she seemed to be managing her life reasonably well. Her social media presence, which Caroline occasionally glimpsed through mutual connections, showed someone who had moved to a different city and was rebuilding, though clearly the drama had left its mark. "How's Nathaniel doing with Emma?" Caroline asked, genuinely caring about this aspect of his life. "Better," Helen admitted. "He seems to have finally understood that being a father means putting her needs first. No more bringing dates around her. No more canceling visits for work. He's actually trying to be the father she deserves." This was genuinely good news. Caroline had always wanted Emma to have a positive relationship with Nathaniel, despite everything that had happened between them as a couple. After hanging up with Helen, Caroline settled into her porch swing with Emma on her lap, reading the little girl's favorite book about a brave bunny who goes on adventures. As they read together, Caroline reflected on how different this Sunday afternoon was from the Sundays of her previous life. There was no anxiety about what Nathaniel might be hiding, no walking on eggshells around his moods, no pretending that their marriage was something it wasn't. Instead, there was peace, authenticity, and the kind of love that was demonstrated through consistency rather than drama. Caroline's freelance marketing business had grown into a small agency with 3 employees. She'd become the go-to consultant for nonprofits and small businesses in Denver, building a reputation for honest communication and reliable results. The financial independence she'd fought for during her divorce had blossomed into genuine professional success. More importantly, she'd become the kind of mother she'd hoped to be: present, honest, strong without being harsh. Emma was growing up seeing what healthy relationships looked like through Caroline's partnership with Tom, what boundaries looked like through Caroline's interactions with Nathaniel, and what self-respect looked like through Caroline's daily choices. "Mama," Emma said, looking up from her book with serious green eyes, "why did the bunny go away?" "Because sometimes, baby girl, we have to leave places that don't make us happy so we can find places that do." "And the bunny was brave?" "Very brave, just like you're going to be." Emma nodded solemnly, apparently satisfied with this explanation, and returned her attention to the pictures in her book. As the afternoon sun began to set over the Denver skyline, Caroline heard Tom's car pull into the driveway. Soon the house would fill with the cheerful chaos of dinner preparation, homework supervision, and bedtime stories. It wasn't the life Caroline had planned when she'd married Nathaniel 7 years ago, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. She'd learned that betrayal, while devastating, wasn't the end of the story. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best thing that could happen to you. That dignity and self-respect, once reclaimed, become unshakable foundations for everything that follows. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was strong enough to rebuild her life from the ground up and wise enough to choose better the second time around. As Tom appeared around the corner of the house with his son Logan in tow, both of them grass-stained and grinning from their baseball adventure. Emma squealed with delight and ran to greet them. Caroline watched her daughter embrace this loving, chaotic, honest family they'd all created together, and felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you fought for the right things. Nathaniel and Veronica had thought they were so clever, conducting their affair while Caroline remained oblivious at home. But they'd underestimated the woman they were betraying, and overestimated their own ability to escape consequences. Now, Nathaniel was learning to rebuild both his professional reputation and personal relationships, while Veronica Sharp had moved on to a different chapter of her life elsewhere, and Caroline Hayes Marshall was living proof that sometimes the best response to betrayal is simply choosing to build something better. "How was your day, beautiful?" Tom asked, kissing Caroline's cheek as Emma chattered excitedly about her garden discoveries. "Perfect," Caroline said, and meant it completely. As her new family headed inside for dinner, Caroline took one last look at the life she'd built from the ashes of betrayal. It had taken strength she didn't know she possessed, courage she'd had to develop, and faith in herself that had been tested and proven true. But it had been worth every difficult moment to arrive at this. A life built on truth, surrounded by people who demonstrated their love through actions, raising a daughter who would never have to question her worth or accept less than she deserved. Caroline Hayes Marshall smiled and followed her family inside, ready for whatever came next. After all, she'd already proven to herself that she could handle anything. What would you have done in Caroline's situation? Do you think she made the right choice by exposing the affair to Nathaniel's parents instead of confronting him privately? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The end. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.